for posterity. Okay. So, hey, what are we going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about solving tricky problems and this thing called Reacto. So, like, to be honest, there are these things called algorithms, and there are these things that are really popular in coding, the technical industry, called whiteboarding interviews. And someone will sit down and, similar to like what we've been doing these workshops, someone will be like, tell me how to sort a list of 10 million numbers. And be like, all right, I don't know how to do any of that stuff. That is not where I excel. In my opinion, like, that's stuff that you have to kind of memorize how to do. And I don't know, like, I don't spend a lot of time studying that. So like, after a certain point in my life, I just started forgetting, and then I forgot more and more, and here we are. But I think that I could do well at some of those, even if I got totally stumped, because of Reacto, because of the process that I use to talk through approach and how I'm going to solve problems. So how does that relate to full stack? The full stack admissions exam assesses for two things: knowledge of fundamental JavaScript, which is the stuff that we're learning in this class. So the stuff that we're learning in this class, and then problem solving ability. How do engineers solve tricky problems, right? A tricky problem is a problem that you do not know the answer to, a problem that you can't really know the answer to, like, right off your head. Sometimes in these whiteboarding interviews, in the real world, they'll give you a problem that they don't expect you to know the answer to, just to see, like, what is going to be your response. Are you going to get frustrated and give up? Are you going to make stuff up? You know, in my last, in one of my last interviews for my job, I started to, like, get nervous, and the person started asking me some questions that, like, I just had no clue. And one of the things they said that was really nice was like, hey, listen, you know, if you know all the answers to all the questions I'm going to ask you tonight, like, you don't need to be working here. You should be working, like, somewhere that is, you know, you should be working, like, for NASA or something. But I'm going to ask you questions just to, like, start a conversation. So that's kind of how engineers solve problems. It's like by starting a conversation and by trying to think things through together. So one way that we can do that, solve things together, is by first identifying the problem, brainstorming solutions, trying one out, implement one, and evaluate it. See, is this the best way that we did it? Did we do what we said we were going to do? Full stack, fortunately, has come up with a nifty, what are these things called? Anagrams? Right? With the letters?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I remembered it? Awesome.
Yeah.
I remembered something today. All right, cool. So anagrams, it's called Reacto. First, restate the problem. Come up with examples. Suggest an approach. Then code things out. Notice how far down the list this is. Then test it. Validate whether or not what your code does is what the problem is. And then optimize it. Try to see, like, okay, well, like, is this the fastest way that I can do it? Is this the cleanest way? Let me try to, like, clean up some of my code to make it look prettier, faster, what have you. So just to go through them again, kind of, to me, like, restating is really translating. It's translating a bunch of stuff that somebody said into something that your brain can process, right? Like, go through this list and sort them. You're like, okay, so you want me to take a a bunch of numbers and rearrange them so that the lowest ones are first and the greater ones are later, right? And a lot of times, like if you're doing this with somebody else, they will want you to understand what you're supposed to do. So it begins a dialogue of like, yes, yes. And that's where you can also ask questions is like, okay, well, like, what if all the numbers are exactly the same, right? Like, what if it's all one? And you can start a dialogue. Then go into examples. Examples are another way that you can reinforce this like mental model, this picture in your head about how this is sort of supposed to behave. It's like, okay, so if I had 2, 8, 7, and 1, it should be 1, 2, 7, 8, right? Okay, so and that's where you can also come up with questions and come up with like little like maybe edge cases or things that on first glance might not be readily apparent. It's a way of kind of building the problem as opposed to like something on a piece of paper. It's like building the problem between you and someone else, right? A shared understanding. And then there's approach, right? It's like, okay, this isn't like sitting down and coding and be like, okay, so it sounds like I need to like go through this list and figure out like where this current number is in relation to the other numbers. Something that I could do is blah, blah, blah. Then after you have that developed and you have discussed what your approach might be, you can sit down and be like, okay, so like let me translate that into code, right? So I'll do a for loop and then I'll get the current number and I will whatever. And then testing is kind of like translating your code into how it would work with an example, right? So just kind of being like, okay, so if I have this approach, if I have this code and I'm supposed to get this, let's see, I would go through the for loop. Here's this, here's the output. And you can kind of track it. Yes or no. Did my code work? Did my code, given the input, output the output what I'm supposed to?
That is actually what I wanted to ask or what I
Yeah.
wanted to address. Where if actually like the test is referring to actually creating a code for testing the code that you just created for this particular problem, or it's just really like a mental work of like going through the code you just wrote and compare it to the example that
Yeah. So what it doesn't mean is like physically writing tests in code. I think the latter that you said is closer to the approach where I could say like, okay, I have like this function, it's supposed to sum two numbers, right? I'm gonna come up with a couple of like cases. I'm gonna say, okay, so if you give me 2 and 2, it's 4. If you give me like 3 and 4, it's 7. Something that I could do like with talking through with another person and that they could agree. Yeah, really good question. And then finally, optimize. What does optimize mean? Well, like if you get done and you step away and your code looks like a big jumbled mess, like one thing that you could do to optimize is just go back in and be like, okay, like how can we make this pretty? You know, like how can we reduce the number of variables that we use or reduce the number of loops that we go through. And then outside of the scope of this class and the admissions test is this idea of like how long your code takes or how much memory your code is using and how you can code towards that, right? Cool. So walking through these again, restate, rephrase in your own words. You can make a diagram if you useful, whatever you need. Make sure you fully understand the problem, that you have built out this mental model of how it's kind of supposed to work, of what the expected behavior is. Come up with examples, give an input and an output. Maybe this is like, these are going to serve for our test cases. Consider the edge cases. Consider cases that might be weird, right? That might not be like readily apparent. Come up with at least one conceptual solution. Don't code it yet, just make some comments in either your code file or on the whiteboard. And then translate your approach into working JavaScript. Full stack admissions team sometimes will even give partial credit for a solid approach, even if the code isn't complete. So I actually did this in an interview like 6 months ago, where I got tasked with doing something in a language I didn't know. But so all I did was just write out the comments. I just said, hey, I think that I would go about doing this here. I don't know how to do, like, I don't know the code to write for this particular thing on this particular language. So I'm stuck and I can't, like, I'm not, they had some dumb rules around using Google. So I was like, based on this, I can't look it up. So here's my comments. And I think I got partial credit for that. What they're saying here is that full stack will give you partial credit for that.
Can I ask a quick question? Because you mentioned Google. When we do the assessment test, can we refer to Google, or is it like, just from memory?
I believe that you will not be able to use Google.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that is silly personally, but HackerRank, the way that HackerRank is set up, it flags things, and it is not always, it can't discern what your intent is. So that can mess with the test.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally understand. Yeah.
So basically we won't be able to use any outside resources, like for example, the w3schools.com for codes.
Correct. But the good thing is like all of the syntax that you'll need to know is here, is in these slides, is in this course. Like hopefully by the end of the time that we get through the end of this course, you won't see anything like break where you wouldn't know about it.
And actually, more adding more to this, this is really, and like my thought process was really like, after you said, I know this was unrelated to full stack, but you said that you were asked a question about coding something in a language that you really don't know how to code. Mm-hmm. So yeah. I would only like to clarify that the test for full stack is actually in JavaScript and yes. Not okay. Cool.
Yes, it will be as though someone gave you a workshop to do. Yeah, the user interface will be a little bit different, but as far as like the language, as far as the stuff, the contents of the test is going to be all stuff that we're learning and practicing with in this class.
When we compare it to the questions that we get in the workshops, mm-hmm. Is it of equal difficulty in the assessment?
It will be, I don't think so. I think that like it will be, the workshops are specific each night, right? Specifically dealing with this one thing, whereas the assessment test will deal with like things that are vast over the course of this course, right? So I would say
it just kind of ties everything together.
Yeah, exactly. From what I understand really is that the problems that we will get there will be like not that obvious on how to resolve it, right? Like you know, it's like the workshops actually showed like you have to create a sum like that results in 4. So how do you come up with those numbers? You know, so and I believe that actually the workshop, well, the actual test on for full stack will be like a real problem on without a and a specific answer. Am I correct?
No, it'll have more or less a specific implementation. It'll be open-ended. Like there's many different ways to solve these problems, but it, you know, like some of the workshop problems will be like from stuff that we've kind of learned this week, where the implementation is like like a loop or like coercion or stuff that you'll have sort of seen over and over and over again for 2 weeks, and then some stuff later on that it'll be kind of like later in the course that'll be more challenging content. But all of it is, the way to solve all of it is going to be with concepts that we learn in this class. That if you say, I will apply this, if I apply this concept, this will solve this the problem for me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have one question.
Sure.
For the assessment for HackerRank, are you able to run your code and test it? Like
yes.
Okay. So
yeah.
it'll like give us like the syntax or reference errors and on what lines and things like that.
Yeah, it'll have some information for you. It'll also have a console log, so you'll be able to log things out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
It's still an editor. It's not like once I press the button, like, yeah, that's it, I'm done. I think it's a little bit.
It allows debugging, let's say.
Yeah, it allows debugging. Yeah, it's not like it's not like a thing where you won't be penalized for writing incorrect code your first time through on a problem. You can struggle through a problem and use the interface to see what is going wrong.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, look,
definitely.
Like, what my experience of full stack is that they understand that like testing isn't universal for everyone. Like not everyone tests the same way. People like that's not necessarily a universal assessment for someone's talent or their understanding of something. So that's part of the reason why there's 2 sections of it is that you know, like you have a written assessment and then you have a verbal assessment. Maybe your skills are different. Maybe you have a different set of skills and understanding. So I would say like things that will help you, 1, the thing that I'm teaching tonight, but also 2, like commenting out and explaining what your approach is and using the text files to communicate your thought process.
Is the verbal assessment going to be in the interview, or is
yes.
that like...
Yeah, the interview.
Okay, and sorry, how long is the assessment, the written assessment? Like, how many questions? Do you know briefly? How long would it take and how many questions?
It's you get some.
Sorry, just to add on that, actually, what I would like to know is that if there is like an actual limit on how much time can you take for passing one problem that you just that like is there like a time limit for a single problem?
No, there's not a time limit for a single problem. You can spend your entire time on one problem if you so choose.
It's okay if I stay there for 3 days?
Well, the test itself has a time limit.
I know, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I'm joking around, guys.
Yeah. The limit for the test is 3 days. So if you can last 3 days, no, I think it's like 90 minutes. It's somewhere between an hour and 2 hours. If I remember correctly, there's like 5, maybe 6 questions.
Guys, you're gonna do fine, okay? Just believe it.
Yeah, yeah.
And like I said, like if
Wait
you
for me and you guys are so scared. Just go for it.
You just have to believe.
Yeah, that's right.
I like Naruto. Believe it.
Yeah, nah, yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
Brandon, sorry, I'm sorry.
no, you're fine. I'm glad. I appreciate the positivity.
Yeah, yes.
Love it.
I try. So if not, I'm gonna cry. So I have to try.
Yeah, look, I totally get it. It's the thing to know is that like there's no one like judging you, you know, like if you like don't perform well on the test, it just means that you might have to continue to study, continue to practice, and try again next time. There's like not that I think that like one of the things that I don't like after doing full stack, there's many things about like doing full stack that made me criticize like traditional education as I know it, growing up in like going to public schools in America. And I think one thing is like one thing I liked about full stack is that it takes away, in my experience, it took away the impetus of like, you need to do this by this time. Like you're on a timeline. And if you miss this knowledge by this time, you can't do it. You're failing, right? Whereas I feel like at least like the things that I was told by instructors in full stack was like, use us, this course is going fast. And we want to make sure that like, by the time that you need to sit in and like build stuff with people, like you can do it. But like having a full understanding of things and like getting an A versus getting an F kind of go away. There's still barriers to entry, but it's not like it's just like hey, look, it's your path to get to this goal, and it might take longer. And we just don't want you to get into a situation where you're at a stage that you're not ready for and that you're struggling just because you need more time. Which is pretty cool. I think I could have used that as a student growing up. Just like I probably could have. Yeah.
I could have used that too also.
Yeah. Like between the ages of 14 and 15, I could have used a year
Definitely.
off,
Definitely.
Right? I remember like, so this is a little bit of a side tangent, but like when I was like 22, I was doing this job where I was completely menial and like anyone could have done it. I was making very little money. And I just remember sitting there being like, how does physics work? I would really like to go to a physics class right now. I would be very interested because this is the most boring thing in the world. I thought physics was boring when I was 15. Copying people's name from one form to another for 8 hours a day is more boring than physics. Anyway, we were doing the slides and we were at code, translating your approach into working JavaScript. And we were talking about how you should try to include your edge cases. This is why like you write them down. You say like, okay, there is one edge case here. There's one case where like I could add this number to this number. Like if I add a -5 to 1, right? Like that's going to be different than just adding like 1 to 1. Right. So I would want to write down, it's like, okay, some can be negative. So I'm going to have a test case where it's -5 and 1. And then we use those examples to test. Use examples in your test specs that are written out that like the test will present to you, but also like if this is a whiteboarding interview and you're standing there with a marker, you could say like, okay, so let's go back to this case, let's do this case, and then let's do this case. And then finally, optimize only if your code works and you have plenty of time. Is there a more concise way to write this code? Are there any like JavaScript built-in methods like slice or something like that that can help me? Did I document my code so that it's easier to understand? Can someone read this at just like a glance? So, okay, so here's an example. Vowel counts. We're going to take in a function And it is going to, it's a function that takes in a string as an argument. So it takes in a string, and the function should return the total number of vowels in that string. Okay, so let's restate the problem. So I want a function that's going to take in a string and it's going to return the total of number of vowels. Like it's going to count the vowels and then give you a number of how many vowels there are. Do I include Y? Is it case sensitive? Like, is this, is capital A different than lowercase a? What happens if I get an empty string? So like restating, asking questions to develop a mental model of how this whole thing should work. And then you write down examples. Because like you're telling me if I get hello, right, that would have two, that would E and O. If I get yummy food, that's two words, right? That's a little bit different than hello. I'm gonna get 5, right? We're gonna count Y in this. I'm being told that we're gonna count Y. So that's 3 for the first word, 2 for the second word, total of 5. And then finally, I'm going to get an empty string, and you're telling me that it's going to be just 0. If I get an empty string, it's 0. Okay, cool. So now I know that like I got to maybe go through each character, right, and determine if each letter is a vowel, right? So how do I know what vowels are? Vowels are specific letters in the alphabet. So like maybe I could have like a string that has those letters in it. Maybe I could have like some sort of number that I like add to, right? This says I will loop over every character in the string, okay? For each character, I will convert it to lowercase. Check if it exists in a string of vowels. If it does, I will increment, I'll add 1 to this vowel count. And then after my loop, I will return the total vowel count. Okay, cool. And then I can translate that into test. I'm going to start off and I'm going to make a string of vowels, var vowels, right? Here we go. I'm going to start off, I'm going to make a var vowel count, start it off at 0. I'm going to loop through all of the characters in my string, get the current character, set it to lowercase with .2 lowercase. And then I'm going to go through each of these vowels, right? Loop through all the vowels and then compare my current vowel to my current character. And if they match, update vowel count.
That's a quick question, Brendan.
Yeah, for sure.
The var is something we don't use anymore, right? We just use like let and const.
Yeah. ES6 has us using let and const. There are some, we'll go over scope next week. Yes, we'll go over scope next week. There are some like functional differences between the three, but we primarily use let for this class.
Okay, var would still work. It's just not like best practice anymore.
We will deal with that. It depends on.
Oh, cool.
What
I'm
you
sorry.
need.
Yeah.
Yeah. It depends, but most people use let.
Okay.
If you're writing an ES6.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
I have a question about this example code.
Yeah.
The variable vowel count is the same name as the function vowel count.
Ooh,
Is that
interesting.
something that like we can do or like we should avoid? I don't know. It seems confusing to me. For whatever.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it is confusing. That's a very good spot out. In fact, if you were optimizing this code, I would say that would be a great place to make a change.
Gotcha. Maybe they'll go in the optimize section.
Yeah, no. Functionally, this will work because of scope and what we'll talk about next week. But when you're inside of the function, it doesn't know anything about what its own name is. It's kind of like, think of it like if your stomach doesn't know anything about your name as a person, or, you know, that was a really stretchy, but it's like once you're inside of the function, it looks for variable names that are also inside of the function.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Well, I was gonna ask for this double for loop. The first loop is just to go through every character, make a lowercase, right? And the second one is to match.
Yeah,
it's included. Okay.
It's to go through our string and get each character, S, T, then R, if that's what the string was. This one, once it gets like S, it'll go through each one of these vowels and compare, is A equal to S? Is E equal to S? Is I equal to S? Is O? So that's what the second one does. It's not the best way to do it. We could simplify with this. There's a JavaScript function, a built-in function called index of, which will take in a character, search for that character within the string, and then if it is in that string, it will give you the index of it. If it doesn't exist inside of that string, it will return -1. So if I pass in, if CAR here is A, then we'll match the first one here, and this will give us back 0. If it's U, it'll give us back 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I passed in like B here, it would go through all of them, and then it would give us back -1. So here we say if vowels index of car, if the index of this element is not -1, add 1 to vowel count. And this looks a little prettier, right?
Quick question.
Yeah.
From the difference of the two codes that you just shown, why do you have break in the first one?
Yeah, so basically what this is saying is, like, let's say you have A, right? This for loop, this vowels for loop, the one that's going to go through all of the vowels and compare them. If I match, I don't want to go then to like E, I, O, U, right? Like I'm sitting there saying like, oh, A matches A. I have a match. I don't need the rest of it. So that's why I have break. I think that it's a little confusing. I think that this is clear. I think that this is like, hey, I have a letter. Check to see if that letter exists in the string. If it does, do val count ++.
Now, in this output, it's going to give you the vowel count, but it's going to give you the place of the letter instead of the letter itself, meaning like you said 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
This particular thing here, Will, the vowels.index of.
Yes, the index of the character. Okay.
It'll give you the index of the character.
All right.
Yeah, good question.
So the index of method that acts as like refer to this paired variable as like use this as like a library to pull from?
Not a library. I mean, technically what it does is it goes through each letter and compares whatever you pass in to it. Technically what it kind of does is this right here. But like me as a developer, this is a little like, I have to read all these lines of code. This is a little cumbersome. This is clear.
It's a little bit like, I don't know, I think of it a little bit like a Boolean in the way that, like, you know, because if it's not in there, it's going to return -1, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
So like if it's -1, that means it's not in there. If it's not -1, it's going to be above. It's never going to be less than -1. So that means it's going to be in there. So it's a little bit like a Boolean.
Yeah. We're using a provided function for us to replace like a big chunk of code here. We're like, instead of having to write all this out, we're saying, hey, JavaScript has a thing that basically does that. Let's use it here so that we can get closer to like basically just having a Boolean, right? Like if the character exists inside of vowels, it will return like whatever index it starts at, whatever index it's at. If it's not there, then don't do anything. If it is there, then do stuff. Makes it a little cleaner. Okay, so today's problem, you're going to be building a Caesar cipher, an encryption scheme favored by the ancient Romans. Your function, and there's a workshop to this, so I'll post that momentarily here. But your function will take a string and a number of characters, and it will shift each character in the string by that number of letters. So for instance, dog shifted by 4 is HSK, right? So like dog, D plus 4 letters is going to go D, E, F, G, H. Yeah, same thing for O, same thing for G. A2 Reacto. Remember when you approach this, and I suggest that like you try to write it out as best you can in comments, is to restate the problem, try to come up with examples or read the examples that are in the tests at the bottom of the file. Write out your approach line by line. And when you write out your approach, I would say like try to do the simplest stuff first, right? Like I know that I'm going to loop through this string, right? Don't worry about shifting the letters or whatever. It's like, I know that I need to like loop through each letter. I know that I need to do this. You can even write down stuff like, figure this out in a minute. But I know what it's going to give me is like such and such, and I can run with that and like return it. So write out your approach, code, test, and optimize. Yeah. Going to stop sharing my screen now.